Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, just so I know who's here, can I get a show of hands? How many of you are Amazon sellers? Okay, great, a lot of us, great. So this presentation will be for you. Secondly, who's coming here to a trade show for the first time? Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Gary Huang. I'm the founder of 80/20 Sourcing, and I work with a lot of Amazon sellers, and I show them how to source from China. I share a lot of best practices from my years of sourcing in China, and so let's begin. So first, I have a question. Who wants to own a 7-figure Amazon business and be able to swim in your money like Scrooge McDuck? Okay, I expected more hands. Okay, great. Okay, so the good news is that a 2016 survey of Amazon sellers, multi-million-dollar Amazon sellers are 2 times as likely to attend trade shows than non-million-dollar sellers. So the good news is you're here. You are taking the right step to grow your business. However, as you've heard today, there's a lot of challenges sourcing from China. I know a lot of you are very frustrated with how time-consuming it is, quality control problems, defects. And so today, I'm just going to focus on attending the trade show so that you can find the right suppliers, you can ask the right questions, so ultimately you can find the right product at the right price. Okay, so let's dive right in. Oh, before we begin, a quick background about myself. I was made in the USA, and I was exported to China. I was born and raised in LA, sunny California. Anyone from LA here? Awesome. Okay, did you watch Kobe's last game?
No, I was here in China for business.
Oh, okay, business.
But I saw him before.
Excellent. Okay, business before pleasure. That's good. Okay, and I was exported to China. I moved to Shanghai in 2008, and I've been working in sourcing since 2008. I'm a former director of sourcing for a consulting firm. I've managed multi-million-dollar sourcing campaigns. So I've seen a lot working with a lot of different factories, going to trade shows. So basically, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm here today to share some of the best practices with you guys. Oh, and one more thing. I'm also an Amazon private label seller. I just got into it recently, so I can kind of understand the frustrations that you guys are going through. So I really wanted to tailor this presentation for you guys. And by the way, the slides will be available from my website, 8020sourcing.com. I'll share the URL with you guys afterwards. All right, so let's dive right in. So today I'm gonna share the information in 3 sections: at the show, post-show, and tricks of the trade. Okay, so first, let's take a step back. Who's heard of the 80/20 rule? Okay, so it's the law of the essential few and the trivial many. 80% of the world's GDP is controlled by 20% of its people. 80% of a company's sales normally come from 20% of its products, the best sellers. And then the same thing applies to sourcing. 80% of the suppliers on the trade show will not be the right fit for you. So your job is to find the 20% there are. And then I call them the yes suppliers, because these are the ones that you want to follow up with. So keep in mind the 80/20 rule. Okay, so by now you've already pre-registered, you've seen the map, so you're ready to hit the ground running tomorrow. So at the show, your goal is this. You want to see as much as possible in a limited amount of time because the show is huge. And then you want to decide who you want to follow up with after the show. So you want to 80/20 the suppliers. And then at the same time, don't waste too much time on the 80% that are not a good fit for you. Okay, so I actually like to think of it like speed dating, because trade shows are huge. It's like a meat market. I mean, you'll find thousands and thousands of suppliers out there. So first off, you're not going to talk to everyone. You're going to use your eyes to see who can be a good candidate for you based on their presentation, based on their product line. And then you're going to decide who do you want to follow up with afterwards. You know, like in speed dating, you know, who do you want to go out with afterwards? You're not going to go out with everyone. So because a lot of you have flown from the US or from Europe or from Romania to Hong Kong, and you know, your time is really short. So I know, you know, you guys aren't here just for work. I mean, people go out, they have a good time, but you know, you really have to be precious. You have to take good care of your time. So that's 80-20 rule in its essence. So I know that Mike said previously, don't do this, but I actually do this. Because when I am talking with the suppliers, mentally, I'm putting them into 3 stacks: yes, no, or maybe. Where will I put them when I meet them? So I'll get into further detail about this in the next section. So before I get into what questions to ask, first of all, you should question yourself. You should prepare a 60-second elevator speech, because as we learned from the previous panel, the suppliers don't want to just give you a price list if they don't know who you are. So you have to be very specific in your requests. So I like to divide it into 4 parts, EPAC. So experience, it's a short summary of your company name, and your marketplace. The product category that you're in. So be very specific as well, because the more specific you are, the more the suppliers will take you seriously. So as you're talking with them, you want to build confidence. You want to build comfort with them, because just like there's a lot of riffraff, you know, in terms of suppliers out there, there's a lot of riffraff in terms of buyers as well. So you want to make yourself be the serious buyer that knows what they want, that has the ability to buy, and ultimately they make them want to do business with you. Speaking about the ability to buy, I normally don't begin with MOQs. I begin with a purchasing plan. For example, with one of my clients, a Brazilian client that purchased auto parts from Chinese suppliers, when he and I first talked with suppliers, we normally talked about our annual purchase volumes. So for example, they purchased 100,000 auto parts per year, but the first order would just be a couple thousand as a trial order, and gradually we will lead up to that. So one of the manufacturers had mentioned the same thing. This is something that factories love to hear, because they want to know that you're not just a one-shot deal. They want a long-term relationship, because in Chinese culture, stability is very important, especially among the older generation, because a lot of the factory owners, they come from a very different mindset. So just being able to demonstrate this purchasing plan, it will set you apart from your competition. And finally, part 4 is call to action. This is when you start asking questions to them. So I don't necessarily introduce myself to everyone. There's no time for that. I would initiate the conversation, and then when the time comes, I have this ready to present to them. And then I turn the tables on them, and then I start asking them these questions that I'm gonna get into. So the first question is, let's say you're looking for a lemon juicer, and you see they have this, or they have something similar to this. I would ask them, do you manufacture this product? If yes, then you can proceed. If no, thank you, move on. Second, are you a factory or trading company? So many Amazon sellers want to work with direct factories. And here's I'm going to go over some ways to tell them apart, to tell factories from trading companies. Keep in mind, this is both a science and an art. There's no 100% rule to be able to do this. So first, I ask them directly, and normally they tell you if they're a trading company. But if they say they have a partnership with a factory, normally they're a trading company. I look at their company name on their business card or on top of the booth. If it says import-export company, if it says trading company, normally it's a trading company. Yeah, it sounds kind of obvious, but sometimes people neglect that. The next one is to look at the products. I call this a common theme test. For example, a factory may have a common theme. They manufacture silicone products. So if you see silicone gloves, silicone baking sheets, silicone measuring cups, for instance, that kind of makes sense. A factory will be able to do this entire product line. But on the other hand, trading companies tend to sell everything under the sun. They may sell iPhone cases, power chargers, or selfie sticks. So normally that's a dead giveaway just by looking at the product line if they're a trading company. And just by doing this, you can 80-20, about 80% of the trading company is out of the mix. Next is the country test. A lot of you guys are from the US, you're selling on the Amazon US market. If the factory, you ask the factory, where do you export to, which countries? If they say Africa or the Middle East, that means that it's normally cheap, low quality product. Think 99-cent only or the dollar store product. So depending on what your needs are, it may not be a good fit for you. And I wouldn't try to bring them up the value ladder because their whole supply chain is designed around low cost, from low cost raw materials, low skilled labor, even the packaging, their designs. So that would be very risky. So this is very important in terms of the country test. Four, besides this product, what other products do you manufacture? I ask this question for two reasons. One, you're double checking the common theme test. Does this make sense? They're manufacturing silicone mats, silicone gloves. Does it make sense? And two, you can discover new product opportunities that you didn't think of. So for example, if you can add more products to your Amazon product list. So this is a win-win situation. Depending on your product, you can ask about the quality control systems. This was covered a lot in detail earlier, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. Just keep in mind that ISO 9001 is the most common one, but there's fraud out there. There's a lot of factories that actually purchase this. So take this with a grain of salt. The next question is very important for Amazon private labelers. Can you OEM or can you private label for me? So this normally will require MOQ or minimum order quantity, which is negotiable. But just make sure going in that they know you want to do this. So they can prepare this for you. And then finally, ask for the price. To me, this is just one variable. It's not necessarily the most important thing at this time in your first meeting. So I try to get an estimate first, and then I'll take this down in my notebook. And then afterwards, when I follow up, then I'll send detailed specifications of what I need and the volumes of what I need. So we'll follow up afterwards for a more firm quotation. So Peter asked me a great question, how to capture this information. Meanwhile, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Peter, to thank Megla, and thank Jennifer for inviting me to speak and also putting on this amazing event for everyone today. So can we give them a hand? Thanks, guys. Okay, so this is the system that I use to capture this information. Keep in mind, you're going really fast. You're meeting hundreds of suppliers. So I just take down the most essential points based on the questions that I asked. And then one mistake that I made is I forgot to put down the booth numbers. And then sometimes when you want to go back to them, you get totally lost. I mean, everyone looks the same. You forget their name. So make sure you write down the booth number. So if you want to come back to them later, you can follow up during the show. I also, well, first off, I staple their business card to the page, and then I take notes underneath. I take pictures with my phone. I take pictures of not only the product, but also the people that I talk to. I learned this best practice from one of my clients. I asked him, why do you do that? And he said, it's, when he goes back home, he's going through all his catalogs and he forgets who's who. So when you have that picture at the booth, with the sign behind them with them, this helps a lot with your recollection and also their recollection, because they're meeting thousands of buyers at the same time. So I like to think this also builds a little to the relationship also. It builds some guanxi, the fact that you're taking time to do this. So that's important, take pictures. And then next steps for follow-up. I also note this in my notebook during the conversation. So these would include the follow-up quotations, follow-up questions, quotations, and for those of you that use Jungle Scout, you can make a mental note to follow up about their product line. You can find some new product opportunities as well. So just to give you an idea, really simple, of what I do when I take notes, I'll staple my business card, I'll jot down their product, where they are, they export to Japan. My initial quotation was $3 per piece. These are hats, by the way. And then next step, I will send them the request for a quotation based on the exact material, the measurements, and a picture. This way, they know that I'm serious about doing business and they can give me a firm price for follow-up. So this is how I capture the information when I attend trade shows. I know it's a long afternoon, guys, so I'll be wrapping up soon. If you have any questions for me at the end, that'd be great. I'm not perfect, and here are some of the mistakes that I've made that I like to share with you guys. Don't fall in love too fast. There's a ton of suppliers out there, a ton of fish out there in the sea. Don't hook up with the first person that you met. Make sure until you see everyone, and then decide who you want to follow up with. If the supplier doesn't fit, don't waste too much time. Just thank them and move on. And don't try to get the final price just yet. Another one of the reasons why they can't give you a final price is, one, the factory owner is not there. So normally in a factory, I've noticed it's like a dictatorship. So the owner, he has the final say. So not only him, the technical team, the engineering team may not be present. They don't know you well enough. They don't know your exact specifications in writing, your volumes. So don't expect to get the final price at the show. Save that for follow-up. And then finally, remember to follow up. It sounds obvious, but you guys are on a whirlwind tour, Hong Kong, some of you guys are going to Shanghai, Canton Fair. Just make sure to follow up. Sometimes I even email them. I have my request for a quotation saved on my phone. I'll just email them right as I meet them. So this way they have it in their inbox when they go home. So make sure don't forget to follow up. And suppliers will forget to follow up with you also. Sometimes it could take like a month afterwards. So don't expect them to follow up with you. You really have to be proactive, because ultimately it's your Amazon business, so you got to make it happen. And then this way it will separate you from your competitors as well, if you're the one that follows up. So once you've seen the entire show, you leave, but wait, you're not done yet. You have to filter and follow up. So after the show, I'll have a stack of business cards, a stack of catalogs, and then I'll separate them into 3 piles. Yes, for follow-up, no for the trash can, and maybe. Reason I keep maybes is for backups. Because in China, as some of you know, shit happens, so it's always good to have some backups just in case. So you're probably thinking, okay, this is a lot of work, Gary. How do you manage all these emails? So I'll give you some advice about that. I create a spreadsheet of the yes suppliers with their key information, their products, their contact information, and also their replies. I follow up using email, and then, I have an email template that I actually copy and paste. So I just swap out the product information, the contact names, so it's really quick. And then in the subject line, I'll include the company name and their product, so this way it's easier for me. So after the show, I'll have a flood of emails and I can know who's who really quickly. And then I create a separate email address, a sourcing email address, because after you give them your email, just be prepared for a flood of Happy Chinese New Year's, Merry Christmas, spam, etc. So I like to have a separate email, so don't give them your primary email address unless you want to sign up for a lifetime of that. So these are some of the post-show follow-up questions. RFQ is the request for quotation. I'll actually, on my site, I have a template for the request for quotations. So I'll share the URL with you guys afterwards because you guys have been awesome. So also clear up any questions about the product and the company, arrange samples if it's needed, and then eventually you want to move towards a trial order. So I think you guys are ready for some advanced tactics. Since you are here, you're at the border of mainland China, you're ready to go all in. If you get a chance for yes suppliers, factory visit. How many of you guys have been to a factory before? Okay, great. Okay, so you guys are ahead of the game. Okay, so this is great because it really lets you peek behind the kimono. You get to see, all the bells and whistles and what really goes on. And then at the same time, it builds guanxi with them.
What is that?
Going to the factory. Just the fact that. Oh, I'm sorry. 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 I've been in China too long. I'm sorry. Guanxi in Chinese, it means connections. It also means relationships. So in Chinese culture, because there's 1.3 billion people, there's a lot of, how can I put that? There's a lot of mistrust. There's, in terms of, food safety, in terms of, it's funny, in Shanghai every morning, air quality, the pollution, it's horrible. I come from LA, we were probably one of the most polluted cities, in the country. I think we're behind Houston now. But being in China, it's just like, you can taste it. I mean, it is what it is. But it's funny because the reason I'm mentioning this is because there's actually two readings for the air quality in China. There's the official rating, which is really low and which nobody believes. And then there's other ratings by US consulate and some other, objective, authorities. So people know that, a lot of things you cannot trust in China. Even, food safety, I won't get into the details, but there's a lot of mistrust in China. So how do you filter that? It's based on guanxi, it's based on connections. Did you take the effort to come to my factory, to sit down with me, to meet with the owner, to show him some face time? You get some skin in the game and show them that you're serious about doing business. You're not just sending, RFQs on Alibaba, send me a price list. You're serious. You really want to build a long-term relationship for the benefit of both of you guys. So that's guanxi. If you have any questions about this, feel free to approach me afterwards. I'm happy to tell you a lot more, a lot of stories that I've been through. So get your skin in the game just by going there. If when the shit hits the fan, something happens with quality, with delays. If the owner remembers you, like, hey, Dominique, he sat down with me, we had dinner, he told me about his family, I showed him some pictures of my family, we're both huge soccer fans, football fans, he'll remember you, and then he might do you a favor. He might be able to, rush your order out ahead of some of their other orders. I mean, it doesn't sound fair, but that's how things work here in China. I mean, if you do that, it separates you from the competition. But one thing to beware the Baijiu challenge. That's not water he's drinking. That's Baijiu. It's heavy Chinese liquor. In Chinese culture, doing business, it heavily centered around drinking. So I know you guys are big boys and girls. So I would suggest either just say no, don't do any of it, or just be prepared to go all in. I mean, that's the Baijiu challenge. But Baijiu. Okay, so part 3, tricks of the trade. So here's some tricks of the trade that I've learned over the years. Get there early. There's less people on the floor, and then you also get more attention. So I try to arrive, right when the doors open. So I hit the ground running. Try to talk to the most senior person at the booth. I try to meet the sales director or sales manager because they have more decision-making power. They may be able to get you a lower price, or they may be able to help you out. Take an early or late lunch to beat the crowds. Avoid the afternoon of the last day. everyone's closing down. They're not in the mood to talk business. So if you go only on the last day, it's going to be a waste of time. So you're already in Hong Kong. You can combine your trip with other goals. Maybe meet that factory that you've been talking with, online or after the show. Go visit them. There's other shows going on at the same time. The Canton Fair, HKTDC. I know it's too late for some of you guys, but don't go out and get too drunk and hungover the next day that you missed the show. You got to be functional. Remember, at the end of the day, you are here at work to grow your business, to find the right suppliers, to ask the right questions, to get the right product at the right price. So ultimately, you can have that 7-figure Amazon business. So in closing, I prepared some bonuses for you guys. Please visit my site, 8020sourcing.com/global sources. I have all the slides from today's presentation, and then I also have an email script of the request for quotation template for you guys. My philosophy is rather than giving a man to fish and feed him one meal, I'm teaching them to fish. So I feed them for a lifetime. So I think even though sourcing can be very daunting, time-consuming, a lot of Amazon sellers are doing it now. They're doing it successfully, and I think you can too. So I'm teaching Amazon sellers how to source from China. So thank you very much, and I welcome any questions.
Questions?
So I had a question. Is it okay to ask a supplier to keep one of the products? Let's say you talk to one of the booths and you see a product that you really like. Is it okay to ask them, hey, would I be able to take this with me? Is that rude? Is that not? What are your takes on that?
Right, so the question is it okay to ask for a sample? And you can ask anything you want. Whether or not they agree to it, that's up to them. If you do want a sample, normally suppliers will not give you it early on in the show. I know I say not to go at the last afternoon, but there are exceptions. Some suppliers may want to get rid of some samples on the last day, so that may be a chance. But go ahead and ask them. You can also follow up afterwards in the email to get the sample as well. Good question.
That one first, sorry.
Good. So you said you're obviously you do sourcing and you're big on the 80-20 rule, and now you're getting into Amazon private label yourself. So if you had to give one piece of advice, obviously everyone's using Jungle Scout now. I know Greg Mercer's here. It's a great tool. We all use it. But the sea is getting full of little fish. If you had to give an 80-20 rule on how to kind of rise above it and try and find something a bit more difficult or a bit more unique in your approach to finding Amazon products and that you can source properly and everything, what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a challenge everyone's facing. I think, first of all, research is really important. I mean, with Jungle Scout, you can find the niches. One of the products that we're doing is we're adding value. So we're, without giving away the product, we're changing things on the product. I come from background of fashion. My mom's a fashion designer, and then we're getting into certain type of accessories that we're changing a little bit. But we're forecasting trends. So we're adding some value to the equation to keep ahead of the competition. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, in the sense that you're making new products as opposed to a strategy of sourcing existing products. You're literally just focusing on product development and forecasting trends.
Right. Product development, I wouldn't say we're making new product, but we're changing designs on certain products. If you look at Steve Jobs, for example, with the iPhone, he didn't invent the smartphone. He just made it better than everyone else. He made it easier to use. So like my mom can use an iPhone, but she's she can't use a BlackBerry, So, I try to think of it that way. Another thing is, everyone's using Alibaba, but not everyone's coming to trade shows. And then at the same time, I talk about this on my site, sourcing beyond Alibaba, finding suppliers that are not listed on Alibaba. Because what I mentioned earlier, like a lot of the factories, they don't want to deal with, buyers that are not serious. So just the fact that you guys are here, a lot of these suppliers, they don't want to list on Alibaba for that reason. They don't want to deal with the riffraff. They want to find quality buyers. So just the fact that you're here, you may be able to find suppliers that your competitors cannot find on Alibaba, because they're in the US or they're in Europe. So keep in mind of these opportunities, these gaps in the marketplace.
So you mentioned that the country that they primarily export to may have an impact on the product quality of that supplier. What would it mean, for example, when they primarily export to Asia, given that it's such a broad market? And how does it differ between, let's say, somebody who primarily exports from Europe and primarily exports to North America? Would you have a preference between one or the other, or does that just depend on your primary market?
Which marketplace do you sell in?
None yet, but just
Okay.
we're planning on Amazon US.
Okay, great. It's a really good question because Asia is really diverse. If you look at Japan and Korea, quality is really high. But if you look at Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, it's really low quality. So you have to dig deeper. Which countries do you export to, not just which regions. So that will tell you more. Different marketplaces have different preferences. In fashion, for example, with my mother's clothing line, they sell exclusively to the US, but they cannot source from factories that only export to Japan because the Japanese fashion is totally different from US fashion. So also keep that in mind because, I try not to retrain them. It sounds kind of bad, but don't try to reinvent the wheel. Try to find someone that has some experience. Don't make them learn on your dime. You see what I mean? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you talk about actively seeking out the trading companies and focusing more on factories. If I already have a good relationship with a trading company rather than a factory, should I be actively trying to get out of that, or, what are the major disadvantages to going via a trading company besides the increased cost, obviously?
Okay, that's a great question. Pros and cons of trading companies. I know a lot of Amazon sellers, especially when they first start out, they actually use trading companies or sourcing agents. Of course, the con is you're paying more because they're adding their markup. Normally it's around 5% or less depending on the product. But they could add value to you. Like, for example, could you share more about your experience with your trading company just so that I'm just curious?
Yeah. They were my first suppliers that I found, and it wasn't until I did a factory audit that I actually realised it was a trading company that I was dealing with. So the independent third party then said, well, do you want the factory or do you want the trading company to be?
How would you rate your experience with them overall? Have you
Perfect.
purchased any products?
Yeah. I've purchased lots from them and they've been fine, very responsive. So I guess besides the fact that I'm paying a little bit more through them, I guess, as opposed to going directly to the factory, should I be actively trying to get out of that situation and, there's no con except for the price, is that?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's up to you. It sounds like it's working out for you, so I wouldn't try to fix if it's not broken. But if the margins don't work out for you, or if something happens, it's always good to have a backup supplier.
Yeah.
So when you're going to the show,
That
keep
is
in
my
mind.
main aim of the show, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're doing the right thing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yes. Yep. Do we have any more time? There's a question up here. Sure.
I just thought I'll add to the experience of a trader. I once wanted a component. This guy wrote to me from somewhere deep inside China. I took a flight, went there. The fellow took me around the city and sent me back home. I knew he didn't have a bolt to his name. So I decided to take a chance. 1 week later, he produced, no, not 1 month later, he produced the component which I could not source. So there are good stories
Yeah.
also in the whole thing. We do C code manufacturers, but there have been instances where I have taken the risk and done it with a pure fellow with just a website on his name.
Yeah, there obviously there. I mean, just by today's sharing, there are positive experiences with trading companies. I mean, yeah, but just be aware of the risk out there. You know, you don't know where they're sourcing from. You know, if something happens, you know, whose side are they going to be on? Right? Are they going to be on your side or are they going to be on the factory side? So you know, you have to ultimately weigh the pros and cons. Yeah. Okay, so if no further questions, yep. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Feel free to visit my site for more information, and wish you all good luck and have a great show.